Welcome back, everyone, to episode 28 of Show and Tell. This is just my small adventure to highlight the creators and contributors to the Magic the Gathering community. After a little time away, I am back and thrilled to be joined with my friend, streamer, model, tournament caster, k0ppk0pp. k0ppk0pp, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
I'm very excited. I got a chance to come out to New York and randomly hung out with you when you saw I was in town. I was joking because I was definitely farming engagement with a bunch of Taylor Swift quotes on my Twitter because there's a there's like the Venn diagram between like Magic players and Taylor Swift fans is like it's very close to a circle in a lot of aspects, and my wife is a very big Swiftie, so I'm like, I'm gonna get some of those likes on a tweet because I'm sure people will see that. I'm like, yes, I'm so clever. Feels good that the dopamine rush of 2 or 3 likes on a tweet,
Work, honey. Yes, get that engagement.
After first meeting you at MTG Vegas or MagicCon Vegas a few months ago, we've kind of been going back and forth and kind of sitting down together, and I'm super thrilled to be sitting down with you today. And I kind of joke like I always like to start at the beginning. So why don't you tell me about when you started playing Magic and what kind of got you into the game?
Yeah. Well, real quick, I will say I'm glad I caught you in New York. I literally sent that DM and I was like, he might not respond, and that's okay. Like, some people are super busy when they visit the city, but you were like, yes, let's get dinner. And I was like, yeah.
That's honestly, that's like the best thing about kind of like meeting people through Magic, because I travel a decent amount for work. So half the time I'm just sitting in a hotel room by myself playing like my Switch. So I was just like, oh my gosh, I actually get to go do something that's not just being bored and watching Shark Tank for 5 hours. This is great. Yeah.
Which, listen, we talked about it. We both love Shark Tank. Okay.
Yes. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I do love Shark Tank. I do love the Shark Tank channel. Yeah.
Shark Tank in a hotel room with my Switch sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great night.
Yeah.
But
it is pretty nice. It is pretty nice. But being able to kind of get a little bit too was very enjoyable as well. Just to put that out there as well.
Yeah. So I started playing Magic back in high school, I believe. Yeah,
Okay.
It was like 2004. I graduated 06. So it was about 2004 where a lot of people don't know this, but I was very deep into Yu-Gi-Oh! At a like highly competitive level.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so in high school, like end of middle school into high school, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime was happening. I wasn't into any card games at that time. Like, I had Pokemon cards, but nobody knew how to play the game. And
Yeah.
But Yu-Gi-Oh! Really, something latched into my brain about that game. And I started playing, and it just so happened that my LGS in South Carolina had the top 2 players in South Carolina. So
wow. Okay.
every weekend, I would get to basically run a tournament setting with 2 of the top players in the state. And that just sort of got me into this mindset of, like, competing and playing to win.
Yeah.
And so I did that for years. I grinded regionals. I grinded tournament points. I was, like, super close to a nationals invite.
Oh, wow.
And it was my life, basically. It was, like, school, theater, Yu-Gi-Oh! And I remember there were these like older kids. We used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! At the lunch table, and there were these older kids that were like, "Why are you playing this kids game? You should play Magic." And I was like, what is that? Yeah. And so they taught me at the lunch table. It was too sort of big for me to understand. I was like, wait, anything is possible? That doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
So I went and bought a deck. My first deck was the Onslaught Black-White Cleric Typal Precon.
Okay, yeah.
And one of my friends gave me a shoebox of bulk that was just like Black-White Cleric support in bulk. And I just started playing there. So I would play Magic on the side with friends, and then I would compete in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was holding both at the same time. But over the course of graduating high school into undergrad, where you go to college, life gets busy, you don't have time on the weekends to go to these tournaments that you need to go to keep up the competitive environment.
Yeah.
I sort of just like Yu-Gi-Oh! Just drifted away, and the format changed a lot, but the thing that stayed constant was my friends still played Magic, like super casually, and so I just always had a Magic deck or 2 or 3 on the side, and I've been playing Magic from 2004 through undergrad, through grad school, and then onwards.
Yeah, I feel like once you start playing Magic, it's always kind of in your back pocket. Like you might go through periods where you don't play it as much, or you're not really involved in the game, but it only takes that one kind of spark to kind of bring you back. Spark, like a Planeswalker spark. Intentional. Hey. But gosh, Yu-Gi-Oh! I have one Yu-Gi-Oh! Story, and it is that I kind of watched the cartoon. It was like when it first came out, and I literally just collected the cards that were in Yugi's deck, like the TV show deck, which is just like,
Kariba,
all that stuff. And then like in college, I had a buddy who played. I don't know if he played like very competitively, but like he had like a real deck. I think it was like Jinzo. Was that a thing at a time? Like Jinzo, or maybe still is.
Classic.
I don't know. Yeah. And we sat down and we tried to play, and needless to say, my deck was just like it just didn't like do anything. He was like, I do this and then whatever, and then you're dead. I'm like, Swords of Revealing Light. I don't know what's going on now. I don't. But yeah, I just and I look at Yu-Gi-Oh cards now. I'm like, man, people complain about the complexity of Magic cards. It's like novels.
Paragraphs.
Yeah, paragraphs.
Yeah, paragraphs of text. Listen. That is the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that you have to understand that back in the day, Konami, he's the company that publishes Yu-Gi-Oh!, built it, designed it, whatever.
Yeah.
Konami used to be so aggressively against what we in that scene called FTKs or OTKs, which is a first turn kill or a 1-turn kill.
Yeah.
Right? Think of it like CDH, right? Like, can I build a thing that literally wins in my opening hand?
Yeah.
And every time the community would find an FTK or an OTK, Konami would ban it. It would run through the tournament scene for a little bit. They'd be like, nope, it's got to go. And they would cut it. Magical Scientist, Yatagarasu, Catapult Turtle to a degree, like Cyberstein, all those cards just immediately were cut off because they wanted a healthy, competitive environment. And then eventually they just said, oh, we give up.
Yeah.
And for me, that started around the Gladiator Beast era when people would literally be able to play through so many things happening in that opening turn because of the way Gladiator Beasts interacted with each other. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, I'm out. Like, this is not the game that I want to play.
Yeah.
Like, it's a beautiful expression of deck building, and to know the lines is a way to express sort of a competitive play environment. That takes knowledge and skill for sure.
Yeah.
But where is the nuance? Where is the sort of tete-a-tete? Where is the back and forth?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. It's basically... And if you watch competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, no offense, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, you're all doing wonderful, you're stunning, you're beautiful. If you watch it now, it's literally a coin flip of who goes first. If you go first, what's your percentage likely to win? It's, really high. So...
Yeah.
But that's where I stuck with Magic because it still allowed me to have a creative deck building expression, and a way to express my identity and still have a tete-a-tete back and forth sort of spar, really.
Yeah.
At least back in the 60 card format days.
Yeah, no, for sure. There was pre-Commander days, I played just mostly Sidewalk Magic, and it was you just throwing cards together, and it's a weird, since there's no, none of us were competitive. It's just you're just grinding these games out, and you're doing all this weird stuff. I actually remember that was probably what really drew me to the game was I would build somewhat typal decks. I was really into knights. I had a cleric deck that I tried to put together. You can hear a dog barking. My dog is going crazy. I think it's just the joys of recording live. People deal with it. It was the lines, just trying to find the lines out of these weird combination of cards. I was like, well, what can I do in this situation? I can do this, do that. It's the live comboing and interactions was always this is what was really, it made it, the mental exercise or the mental hoops you were kind of going through. So.
And that was what I loved about 60 card at the time. I mean, my friends and play group, we didn't know what we were playing. I think now people look at it and probably say it's some sort of Frankenstein between Modern and Pioneer, but we were just putting 60 cards together and at an Esper artifacts that leveraged Master Transmuter, and I had a Simic value engine with Merkfiend Liege and Cold-Eyed Selkie, and had a black-red goblin thing. Like, we were just building stuff because we, back in the day, like, we would draft and you'd, like, build something out of a draft deck that was really cool, so then you'd like expand it, or you'd like pull a card and you're like, I want to build a whole 60 around this thing. But my friends and I played multiplayer 60 card forever. That's what we used to do all the time because we loved it. And I think it was about 2016 when I moved to New York. I found a local play group of friends from different walks of life. We were playing 60 card multiplayer. We'd play at like the Panera Bread. We'd like go to lunch and like get lunch at Panera Bread and then camp at this massive 8-person table for hours. Yeah. But then it was like 2016. Somebody was like, "Hey, have y'all heard of this like Commander thing that's like inherently multiplayer but bigger?" And we were like, "No." And so we bought. I think each of us bought the 2016 precons, and that just sort of took off. So we never looked back.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like when I found like the most recent, like I guess you come and go from Magic. Like when I came back, the most recent time, the last time I came back to Magic was when the first Dominaria set came out. Because I was like, oh, like you kind of see, Dominarias. Like I played a lot of cards from Dominaria, and I kind of recognized some names and stuff. And then for me, that's when I originally found Commander. And I think for me, that was like, oh, this is the format I've been looking for. This is kind of the weird tabletop, like throw whatever you want in a deck, but you have some guidelines with your Commander, but you can use cards. I was like, oh, I can use all my cards from 98, 90, like all my Urza block stuff that. Nothing expensive, of course. I was going back through all my cards from like for how many times I went to Borders Books and bought Urza Saga and Urza's Legacy packs. Do you think I had like really expensive cards? No, but
Rip Borders. Oh my gosh,
that was like that's
we all loved Borders, honey.
Yeah,
it was the Oasis.
Yeah, it really was. Just going in there, grabbing a bunch of books and like doing research for homework or essays and stuff, and then that's where I bought most of my Magic cards because they sold cards behind the counter, and I could walk to Borders from my house back in the day, so that's where I just walked down there and buy cards. And back when like that weird, I'm not old enough to drive, but I'm too young to like have your parents really drag you around if you don't have to. But I have old boxes like the cardboard, the ones that I would put the price tags from the packs on them. It was like Urza Saga like $2.99. I'm like, man, that's not anymore, man. That's like that's not
anymore, baby.
That's like some car payment levels if you get some unopened Urza's packs. But But yeah, finding Commander as like that like kind of casual, but the deck building idea was really like what I think has stuck me around for so long. So.
Yeah, that's what it was for us too. It was like I think it's super important, at least in the Commander space. I've learned that like deck building and creative expression is such a huge part of identity for people, and like there's such ownership of the thing that people build, the idea that they have, that it's beautiful. To me, it's like an absolutely beautiful part of the format, and that's why Commander I think is sort of like really taken off. Is that you're not having to navigate a meta. There's no meta in EDH, and coming from like the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh standpoint of like, I know what the meta is. It's these 4 to 5 decks, and if I want to play something else, I have to go so anti-meta that I'm actively building against this thing. But with Commander, it's like, do whatever you want. And also typically because of the way that the 4-person format can balance itself out, you can take a weaker, for lack of a better word, deck and put it in a pod with like maybe another deck is like stronger, but they're going to balance out because you have 4 people interacting. And that's beautiful. And I also love that like typically with a pre-con situation, that's how people find their intro is like, what is the pre-con that you get first, and how does that sort of like segue you into the format in a way that lets you discover your own voice?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I definitely found like it's funny how strong the pre-cons have gotten like recently. Like it's they're they're very well built. You know, they keep up with a lot of. Yeah. And I found myself now, like, I'll get a pre-con. I'm like, gosh, this thing runs. I played the Doctor Who timey-wimey one with some friends the other night.
So good.
Yeah, it's good, but I was just like, holy cow, there were so many, like, triggers and, like, time counters and suspend counters. I'm just like, a person that was new to Magic would be so lost right now. I was barely hanging on. It was wild. But, like, to your point, I've discovered now, like, you know, I don't really like super strong commanders or commander strategies. I like kind of weird niche stuff. Like, I think, what can I do that's a little out of the box? Like, that interests me as, like, a deck builder and a player. Which, I mean, if you like playing very strong, like, sure, there's nothing wrong with that. But, like, obviously, you know, I think for me, the most boring commanders have become, like, Goshinte of Life's Origin, right? The Shrine Commander. That is, like, a very boring, to me, a very boring way to run shrines, right? Because it's the obvious shrine commander. You have this one card that specifically, like, does all this stuff with the shrines, which is fine, but, like, it's obvious, you know? Like, that's not really what I'm looking for. You know, I've been trying to suss out a Garth One-Eye Shrines deck. So it's like you get your 5 colors, but it's something where, like, you know, it's a little it's cool to be able to cast a Black Lotus because you can make a Black Lotus with them, but it's a little different. You know, it's not as obvious, and that's the kind of thing I find most alluring about Commander, is finding these other ways to approach playing the game. Really, right?
That's what I tell people. I think I've, not to, like, toot my own horn, but I think I've gotten a reputation of building strange decks and also being able to play decks that I build that are a little outside the box. You look at Mono White Landfall, you look at Henzi Phoenixes, you look at Lotho Life Swap, which is, like, its own weird thing, but, like, that is, people are always asking me, like, how do you come up with these ideas? How does this work? Like, what's your deck building process? And to me, I tell people 2 things, which is, one, if you look at a commander and you can build almost 50% of the list in the first 30 minutes of thinking about it, don't build it. Yeah. It's not, you've already solved that puzzle halfway through, and it's sort of inherently built to be solved in the way that it's designed, because those commanders are created for new players, younger players, less experienced players to come into the format. They are, like, their intros.
Yeah.
And the other side of that coin is, like, I just ask myself really weird questions. Like, it's not about answers, it's about questions when it comes to deck building. So, like, I want to do this thing. Like, you're saying, I want to do shrines, but I don't want to do Goshintai. Okay, well, what do shrines need to be, right? And then once you identify what do shrines need to be, what can I do to, like, create value out of that that's not straightforward? I'll give you a great example. Like, the Curse deck has been in my brain for so long. Yeah. And I haven't finished it because I haven't answered all the questions, which is great. Yeah. But it also is frustrating because it's like, I looked at Goshintai. I was like, Goshintai curses. It gets enchantments back from the graveyard. Yeah. But it's 5 color, which means that it's going to be really easy to build. You don't need green to do curses, but the only 4 color in the Your Tiller black, white, red, blue are strange partners like Temna Krom, you know, which I tried Temna Krom, and then I simplified it down to, well, maybe it is just Grixis, but you don't want to run Linda because she's the classic Grixis curses. So is it Jeskai? Well, Jeskai doesn't have a way to close the game. Like, always ask questions when deck building. That's what I do because it keeps me hungry to answer it and find a way to do something that hasn't been done before, or, like, hasn't been done by, I'll zoom it back, a lot of people. I think hasn't been done before is impossible. It's Magic. Yeah. Yeah. Everything's been done. Yeah. Like, I would hope.
Yeah. And, like, when you start building outside the box, it lets you play with cards that people maybe never would have seen before or wouldn't have ever thought to play. I think that's what the cool thing is. You can play a card and everyone's like, what is that? Like, what is this random uncommon from Nemesis that you are playing that, oh, this makes a lot of sense for what you're doing? Like, that's super cool, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I just had that happen in working on a CDH deck where somebody was like, oh, you could put these 2 cards that are really old in the deck and they have, like, an infinite inside them. I was like, what are these 2 cards? I've never heard of these before.
Yeah.
So
That's too funny. So you obviously been playing a lot of Magic for a while. When did you decide to get into streaming? I feel like the jump from now, obviously, just talking to you for the past 20 minutes, you were born to stream. You have I think the personality to kind of be out there, and you need to be in front of a camera, in my opinion. So when did you decide like that streaming was like something you really wanted to take on for you?
I so I think the beauty of the journey is that hindsight will always be 2020.
Yeah.
So, and you're not the first person to say that, and I thank you for saying that, because like I kind of always, as a person who like struggles with self-worth and self-doubt and what am I doing and why, to hear that stuff is very good and reassuring. I did not think that I was meant to do this. I never thought that I actually never took a film acting class. I'd never put myself in front of a camera before. But content happened as a means of artistic necessity. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, we've heard it before, but yes, the pandemic forced a huge pivot for me.
Yeah.
Into a digital space. So a lot of people don't know my background, but, like, I come from theater. I did undergrad acting, musical theater, like song and dance, fight choreography, baby. Like, I did all of that stuff.
Oh,
and yeah, and then grad school, I moved into directing and producing because I struggled as an actor with having people make the career decisions for me. Okay. Like, you walk into an audition room, and if I get the role or not has nothing to do with my talent. It is everything to do with the people behind the table deciding my fate for me.
Yeah.
And I hated it.
Yeah.
So I said, well, if I want control over my career, being a writer, director, producer gives me agency. Yeah. So that's what I did. I studied theater for 6 years. I moved to New York. I worked off Broadway. I worked on Broadway. I've worked with like Broadway producers, managing directors, and that was my life. You know, I was writing a musical that was being pitched to regional theaters. I had a whole team of people. There was 5-6 figures of money involved. Like, wow. And then the pandemic hit, and my entire industry went upside down, like upside down, and that was also around the same time that I also, my 5.5-year relationship ended. And that ended because of addiction that I did not understand or comprehend. And so it just, when people talk about like what a rock bottom is, like that for me was waking up with no artistic industry or career, no relationship, and all of a sudden I have been acting in a way and behaving in a way and self-destroying that I had not really put together. Yeah. And so I was very lost. I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know whether I should be in New York anymore. There were so many questions. And I have a very dear friend who said, we were at brunch, as you do. And she was like, Steven, you keep opening this toolbox and all the tools inside of it remind you of a life that is no more and a career that is no more. And it makes you sad. You look at these tools, you can't use them. So she was like, you need to go home and spend some time, take the tools out of the toolbox, figure out what to keep, and figure out what to add. You need to add new things to your toolbox. And I really took that to heart. I had been watching Twitch for a while. I've been watching Wasabi do the Animal Crossing drag race weekly competitions that he was doing. I've been watching Ethan Nestor crank gameplays because I really just loved his vibe and his aesthetic. But, like, I didn't get it. I didn't understand what subs and bits and follows and channel points and all this stuff was. I was like, it's just entertaining.
Yep.
But when I wrote down all the things that I really enjoyed doing, it was theater, producing, being a personality, talking to people, interviewing people. I used to have an interview podcast that I used to make and get paid for through a outside company. And I was like, well, what's the overlap of all these things? Oh, it's streaming. So I taught myself how to use an OBS, and my Magic play group in the pandemic played on Spell Table and on Zoom every Saturday anyway.
Okay.
And so I just said, I was like, hey, I learned how to do this. I kind of want to try it. It might not work. Nobody might show up. But y'all don't have to do anything. You're just going to play the game, and I'm going to press go live, and we'll just see what happens. And things happened.
Yeah.
But that's the easy part. Like,
oh, yeah.
Ironically, because once I went live and then monetized the channel, I went, oh, shit. Well, now I have to, like, now my producer brain comes in.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, you have to make this a thing because now it can make you money. Mm-hmm. So it had to have a brand. It had to be well produced. It had to have a purpose, you know? And that's where the format that people know my stream now to be, which is that sort of like middleman caster commentary format developed, was because I saw a gap in the space, and when you see a gap, you try and fill it and hope it works.
Yeah, no, that's excuse me, that's can relate with you 100% in terms of that's how this show kind of got started. Pandemic kind of hit, everyone's kind of locked inside, and I think you talk about like there's like when you're interested in like doing art, like I do photography, I do video. When you are kind of put in a position where like you can't create, it creates this kind of like pull in your stomach and in your soul. You got to do something, right? You got to find a way to express yourself. And now, unlike you, I do not necessarily enjoy being in front of the camera. That's why I joke I'm a photographer. This whole show, this whole experiment that I'm doing, it makes no sense because I'm very shy and very introverted. But here I am. I put myself on YouTube. But whatever.
You're pushing yourself.
Exactly.
You're pushing your own boundaries, which is great.
Yeah. So that's what I tell myself. Like this is like it's a passion project, and it's a way to kind of like push a certain artistic avenue forward. But like I saw a space where I can kind of try to like reach out to people in like this community that I have found that I've enjoyed and that I've made friends in, and to kind of highlight that work in terms of like, you look at Magic, for me, like you look at Magic as a game, but it's so much more than a game. Like the game, the game's part of it, but it's the community around it, right? And there are so many people within the community who make it worth being a part of. And for me, I saw that's where I was like an opportunity where, cool, this is where I can kind of use my interest in talking to people. And, I joke, like I call myself a portrait photographer, but like this is like a video portrait that I can kind of engage in people with. So that's where I kind of like see this pushing me forward. And I can imagine like for you, oh, I got real close to the mic right there. It's like I hear the feedback, ASMR mode.
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah. But like, yeah, so I can totally understand, like, we were all kind of stuck inside. You're trying to find this way, and like, once you kind of get it, you're like, oh, this can be a thing. But I've had a lot of guests come on, and it's like the recording, like the playing of the game, like hitting live on OBS and playing a game of Magic or whatever is the easiest part of it all. Everything that comes after, everything that comes behind the scenes, like that's where the hard work is, and that's what really separates the people who have, who go and, have 1 or 2 to 3 to 4 followers on Twitch versus people who are like do this consistently, because that's where you kind of you make your bread and butter, is like the effort behind the scenes, which I can imagine someone with the producer background, like it was probably in your head, you're like, it's like that meme. It's like, oh shit, here we go again. But there was probably like an excitement there too. You're like, yes, this is something where I can take that, to your, like your friend said, take that toolbox, and all of a sudden those tools are looking pretty useful again. Like now I can kind of redirect that energy in a way, and in a game that you already like to play, right? You're already like in it. It's like a zone. So I definitely can. Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like I think all people are artistic in their own ways. Like it may not be like painting, or may not be like drawing. For me it's photography. There's other art is like, I say this all the time, it's a very amorphous, ambiguous sort of thing. Like there's more to art than just like what you may first imagine. And when you find that outlet, it's like that's when you really are like, yes, this is something I want to do.
Yeah. Art is so, I mean, it can be anything at this point, and it's so beautifully subjective. Like, I think that, like, the people who kind of, like, bunch art into either a visual medium or an auditory medium or something like that, it's like, no, it literally can be anything can be a piece of art if you really sort of, like, let it affect you. That's the huge part. Is like, it's not about whether I cerebrally appreciate it. How is it affecting me? How is it hitting me? So it's funny you talk about community, because like I was the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. I didn't know about the community. I didn't know a bunch of Magic streamers. I really wasn't paying attention to content creators. I just was like, I saw a thing and was like, oh, I should do this. This is cool. Nobody's doing this yet, right? And producing, like, I tell people, that is like 75% of the job of a producer, is to see the thing that's not being made and make it, or wait to make it at the right time. Timing is so much about producing, especially when it came to like theater. Working with a Broadway producer who would have multiple scripts and ideas of shows on a shelf, and would walk me through them and be like, this show is this, done in this style with this message and this aesthetic, but we can't do that right now because it's not appropriate, but like in a few years it probably will be, so we're gonna hold on, right? Or like, I have this great idea, I really want to produce it right now, but we shouldn't because Hamilton's going up for a Tony. Nobody should be producing anything when Hamilton's gonna go up for a Tony. You know, you learned that, like, oh, timing is huge. But I didn't know anything about the community at all. If I could give myself a piece of advice, it would be to sort of like meet the community sooner, because I felt so isolated for a long time. Like, for the first, I'd say 2 years, almost 2.5. I just felt like I was operating in a bubble. And why people were showing up, but they weren't showing up at the speed and the interest at which I wanted them to. There was like a nice organic discovery of what I was building, but I didn't feel like I was kicking the door down or like really making an impact. And that shifted for me when I went to MTG Summit in 2019, I believe. Maybe no. It was like 2021 or 2022. It was. I said, I'm gonna go to this convention, and I'm gonna literally like Kool-Aid man through the door. I'm gonna literally let the world know that I exist, and that I've been building a thing, and it's a cool thing. And I had a few people on stream as guests. I started to realize that the streaming formula really needed guest artists to come on. So like Queen of Cardboard, Beth, I adore her. She's one of the first people that guested on my stream. And then subsequently through Beth, I met Jen and Donnie, Filthy MTG, and I was like, oh, these people are really nice and cool, and there's like more to this than I thought. So when I went to MTG Summit, the community sort of really like wings open enveloped me. Draffinat, Anna Margaret, MTG Baron, I met Veggie there for the first time. Like, all these amazing people were like, hi. And that's when I realized that this is bigger than me. This is not about me anymore. The thing that I'm building can be really cool and different, and if people like it, they like it. But I should be here for the community and the people. And the same way that person in high school helped me get started by handing me a box of bulk is the same thing that I should be doing to the people in this community, which is giving back, helping, ushering, greeting, and embracing the same way that I was embraced.
It's amazing. I think about it all the time. Like, I've now made friends like through Twitter, through Magic. Like, I never, even like 2 years ago when I kind of, it's probably been longer than I'm doing this now, but even like 2 years ago, I never, there's kind of people I talk to, and like, you send message on Twitter and you comment on other people's posts, but to actually say like, oh no, I have people who I would consider friends, like I text with and I talk to, and it's wild. It's like wild to me, and I just think, you know, magic has become such a big part of my life that being able to be involved in a community, and being involved in a way that makes it accessible to everyone. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I like to say all the time, like the game is for everyone, and we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in the space. Um, and that's, you know, that's part of my mission here, is to highlight people who I think do a really good job at that. You know, uh, people who are working towards a gaming community that's everyone's welcome, everyone's fun, everyone's like, to your, you know, arms wide open, right? I mean, you mentioned Queen of Cardboard Beth. I mean, Beth is fantastic at that. She's phenomenal, and even, I mean, that's, you know, that's, I think, very important, especially, you know, we're in a time where there are a lot of people who are their livelihoods are under attack just for existing, right?
Yeah.
That's just, and like for a gaming space to be reflective of any sort of aspect of that is just not what we're aiming for. So, you know, I think being able to, you know, for someone who could go to like their local game store and not feel outcasted for trying to just play Magic, I think that little bit can be, you know, can make someone's day, right? It's hard to think about, well, what are large scale things we can do to like change the world, and you know, there's existential things we can talk about in terms of voting and all that kind of stuff. But like from you know, from a day to day, like a real, just like, I'm just, you know, I get up, I go to work, I have my dogs, I'm like, but you know, how can I contribute into maybe a not grandiose sort of way? It's like, well, let's make sure that we're putting people in place, or we're giving people their flowers that are promoting those ideas. And I think that's just the power of this this community has on us, you know.
Yeah, and that's a big, like, that's a big part of actually recovery, is that in the sobriety space, you know, we always ask, like, well, where can I be of service today? Where can I get out of myself, my own ego, my own way, to help someone else, or to be of service to someone in a way that does that small integral change?
Yeah.
Because when I get out of my own self and my own person, my life expands, things grow, I feel better. And so, you know, I gently encourage people to ask themselves that question, sober or not sober, that's irrelevant. Where can you be of service today to humanity, to people on the street, the subway, the homeless person, your neighbor, like someone in the community? Like, it just, I think it's the way change happens incrementally, the same way that love is a culmination of multiple feelings of joy. Mm-hmm. Like when people describe what love is, like there is that feeling of small moments of joy compounded create a sense of love. Yeah. And I think that acts of service, small acts of service compounded over not just one person but many people, create a sense of community and acceptance. And it's just, I have to remind myself of that every day. And but it's also, it's being that voice or that person as a gay boy who grew up in the South and who felt like I didn't know who I was and never really saw myself anywhere until like the early 2000s, when all of a sudden like Will and Grace and Project Runway started appearing on TV, and my mom knew, because she was like, oh, you need to watch these, you'll love it. And I was like, I do love it. Well, but when I started to see myself in mainstream media and identify, that's when I felt like I could finally understand who I was. And for the Magic space, that was a big shift in my content. If you watch a lot of my older content, it's very coiffed, I think. It's very like, hey, I'm a person, and I'm trying to stay as neutral as possible as a person so that I can attract the biggest audience because I'm relatable. And then all of a sudden it was like, no, I'm gay. Like, honey, like, I need to be more of me, because somebody out there, some young gay kid in the South who doesn't think that they see themselves in the Magic space or on Twitch, which I mean, at this point, everybody's into it. But like, you know, if they see that person, they say, "Oh, well, I can be welcome there, right? Like, if that person's there, then I can be too." And that is also a big like mission statement for me. It's like, where can I show up and be the person I am, which is a loud, queer, fashionable, gay man, for anybody else who might feel like they can't show up and play Magic because they're that person. Like, whether it's their local game store or a Magic Con or PAX Unplugged or wherever, you know? Like, so...
It's
you
important.
find it in the journey.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's representation matters. I know it's like there's a lot of people who want to poo-poo that idea, but it's like, no, it makes a big difference. Like, you know, like I'm just like a cis hetero white dude, right? I have been seeing myself in heroes and stories my whole life, you know? So to give people the opportunity to like to see themselves in it, it's like that's important. I don't need another, you know, white male hero. You know, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and people like drag Daisy Ridley all the time. She's a Mary Sue and all this. I thought Rey was awesome. There are so many. You know, I live right next to Disneyland, and do you know how many little girls I see at Galaxy's Edge walking around in Rey costumes because they got to see this kick-ass like Jedi? I'm like, yes, that's freaking sweet. Like, yeah, I love Luke Skywalker. That was probably my guy growing up. But like, I'm ready for like, let's just go. Like, give me Rey, give me Jedi Master Rey, give me her new trilogy, her movie or whatever. Like, I'm all for it. Like, we need more of that. You know, like that's what I want to see. So, it's you know, these nerd, I feel, I mean, it's really everywhere these days, but like, especially if it was like a nerd spaces, it's very easy for people to gatekeep because it was like, and you know, like there's a part of me that kind of gets it. Cause like when I was like younger, like Star Wars was not cool. Like Star Wars was not cool. Being into Star Wars, like that was not a cool thing to be.
We used to make fun of the kid who brought the lightsaber to school. Literally, there's a kid in middle school, and he would bring a lightsaber to school, and he would wear this Jedi uniform, and we all made fun of him. Like,
that was me. My friends and I would go to our backstop. We had sticks that we made into lightsabers, so maybe a little cooler because it's not the thing. But like we pretended to be Jedi, right? That was what we did. But you know what?
Yeah.
If a kid rolled in, if I was in high school now, if I showed up in a Jedi cloak, everyone would be like, "That is sweet. Like, where'd you get that cloak?" Because that's how popular, like how mainstream all this stuff has become. And I think there's like a segment of people who are like, oh, well, this was like my secret thing, and now everyone knows about it. So like they feel betrayed maybe, but like, no, that's not the point. Like it's for everyone. Like everyone, like why would you want to limit the joy on someone? Just like you're not losing any joy. Like what joy is being stolen from you?
Right. And well, that's also if you zoom out on that a little bit, like my marketing brain kicks in, because the other thing that I think people maybe don't understand yet, or like haven't figured out, is that like there's an entire generation of people who grew up where that was not cool.
Yeah.
And now those people are in their late 20s to 30s to mid 30s and are working jobs where they have income. Yeah. And now they can buy things that are cool. Yeah. And the rise of nerd culture, I think, has grown as, you know, we have gotten older, and now it's become hyper mainstream for these things to be cool. And also, you know, nostalgia is a highly marketable concept. So like you see it everywhere. My D&D group and I were just talking about the Twister remake that's happening. It's why are we redoing Twister? And it's like, because it's nostalgia, honey.
Yeah.
We're marketing nostalgia. That's what we're doing.
Also, what is it? Glenn Powell, is that his name? The guy from Top Gun. I think he's in. He looks good. He looks like a badass in aviator glasses. Like, all right, this looks kind of fun. I'm in.
Yeah.
I get it. Too funny. Okay, so I got to touch on a few things. The first thing I have to ask, because my wife will kill me. Background in musical theater. My wife was a theater kid, huge musical person. What is I need to know your top musical. Like, what's your favorite music? There might be. I know it can be hard for people. Like, if you had to pick, like, my wife is obsessed with Les Mis. That is her.
Yeah.
Like, she is a Les Mis, and she's seen it in Paris, and like we just saw it a few months ago down in Irvine, and anytime I can make a Les Mis joke, like I kind of make the joke and I look at her like a dog, like a little puppy, like, yeah, is that good? She's like, yes, that's a good joke. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm like, yes, like I did it, you know?
Oh, adorable. I have a few, like, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown lives very close to my heart. I did it when I was young. I redid it when I was in grad school. Jesus Christ Superstar, really close to my heart. I've done that production. I've seen a few wonderful productions of that. But like my modern marketing brain, I mean, like Spring Awakening and American Idiot, I think are like beautiful pieces of modern musical theater that leverage a lot of beautiful things that are also highly commercial. Like, that was really what kind of latched me into theater, was like, oh, we can take something that's old and make it really cool and marketable. Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, classic. Like, classic way. I think that film shifted a lot in the cultural subconscious about what art and theater could be, because now we're doing Shakespeare with guns on Venice Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio, and it's hot. Too funny. But that's like, I have a few answers. I mean, I'll go back and listen to musicals all the time because I still like singing. I like singing to myself, like when I'm walking down the street or something. I don't do it as much as I used to, but
those are all the. I always, anytime people talk about musicals, I have to get the question from my wife, and she like Les Mis, Into the Woods. I think is one of her big ones.
Oh, Into the Woods is just a fucking beautiful life lesson. Like, there's so many beautiful things inside Into the Woods that if you've never heard of it, if you're listening and you've never heard of Into the Woods, go watch a production of it, because those lyrics and that journey, life is the woods. Every single time you go into the woods, you know, you are changed, something happens, you are affected, and it's a beautiful reminder.
Too funny. So I kind of want to talk about Broadway. Like, you know, you live in New York, like you work on Broadway. Like, to me, I'm just like, I feel like just a little city kid, like the bright lights of New York. What was it like working in Broadway? Like, how did you get? I mean, obviously you went to, your background was a little bit in theater, but like what was Broadway like? Can you talk to me about Broadway a little bit? I'm just
So I moved to New York for that exact reason. Bright lights, big city, Southern farm boy needs to escape the South and wants to feel a part of something, right? It was a workup, right? Like, I came to New York and it was like off Broadway, self-producing, self-writing. And what happened was I was the managing director for an off-Broadway company, or an assistant managing director for an off-Broadway company. That taught me budget management. That taught me how to work with a company ensemble. And then I got an internship at Caleri Casting. And they were the casting agency who did Hedwig and the Angry Inch when it was on Broadway with Neil Patrick Harris and Taye Diggs and Michael C. Hall. So when I got that internship, I was like, oh, I've seen Hedwig like 3 times already. And they're like, oh. I was like, yeah, I love Hedwig. So they made me the sort of like head intern for the casting for Hedwig, because that show had a rotating famous lead. And so somebody had to do the research around, hey, what famous actor can sing that we don't know about, right? So I'm sitting there on YouTube, like literally trying to find every like actor that I can think of who could be really cool in Hedwig. That I remember finding, I can't name names of like who they were looking at, but I remember finding the name of a very famous actor who there's a grainy YouTube clip of this person singing karaoke that somebody randomly filmed, and I was like, look, they can sing. You know, like that was my job. But it was really cool. The casting internship was over, and that agency shared an office with David Binder, who was the executive producer for Hedwig. And at the same time, David's assistant left. And it was, when people talk about right place, right time, coincidence, lightning struck, I was literally at the right place at the right time, and I just got up from my desk and walked to the other side of the room and sat down at David's assistant's desk, and now I'm the personal assistant to a Broadway producer.
Oh, wow.
And took all the Hedwig knowledge and then pivoted it to, well, what does the producing side of Hedwig now look like? Mm-hmm. What is those budgets? What do those meetings look like? How are we building for the national tour? Because the show's going to have to close at some point. And now and then it just sort of became this whirlwind of like, I'm backstage at the Belasco, and I'm on an email chain with famous people, and I'm at an after party with Darren Criss, and like, what is happening? Like, you know?
Yeah.
But The Devil Wears Prada is a very accurate movie, and it is also why I no longer am a personal assistant, because that life is real. I learned so much working with David, and I love him, and I'm so grateful for all the things he taught me. But when you talk about life of being a personal assistant, it is that erratic and crazy sometimes, and the requests that you have to fulfill because you are working on a show that is multi-millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's got to be done, you know? And there's two reasons why I ended up not continuing to work. One, David had to go to London for a year, and he was like, I can't take you with me. So I was like, oh. But also, you get lost in, I was always David's assistant. No one knew my name.
Yeah.
Oh, you're David's assistant. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Yeah, I am. I guess so, yeah. And at some point I was just like, the timing of him having to go to London and me feeling like I don't exist, like I do and I don't exist, was just the right time to pivot into a different role. But and subsequently, that environment, I now have learned through recovery that environment actually fueled my addictive personality. That hyper energy, always on edge, frantically working, last minute things, running around the city. I actually feed really toxically on that energy. Mm-hmm. So much so that I don't eat. I wasn't eating. I was up till 3-4 in the morning. I was always on edge. I didn't have time for anybody.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm like, oh, huh. Like, how much was my career fueling my own addictive personality and those traits inside of me? Which is why people ask me, will you ever go back to theater? And I'm like, I don't know, probably not, because I'm in the content space. I get to work on my own time.
Yeah. For
myself. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, okay, so it's funny because I don't know why, but my wife, somewhat recently rewatched The Devil Wears Prada, and there's like this this contention where I can't remember his name, but Anne Hathaway's boyfriend, like some people go, oh, he was a jerk to her, like he got in the way of her, whatever, but other people are like, no, he was right because this lifestyle was like horrible for her, right? So I guess here's an interesting question for you is, do you have, like, if you had to think about it, someone's like, oh, do you think the boyfriend was correct in that movie? Because someone who's kind of lived that world, because obviously it's kind of like a dream job in a way, like especially from the movie. Yeah. You're working for this top fashion designer, but like it's like the stuff you have to do to get there. It's like you kind of lose yourself as a person because you are, you kind of talk about like, oh, you're his assistant. You weren't, cop, you weren't Steven. Like.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I'd be interested. Like, what would do you think? Do you think the boyfriend was right in that movie in terms of like how he looked at the job?
I think he was right in his feeling, or I think he was right in how he felt. I don't think he was right in the way that he approached it.
Yeah.
Like, I think the aggression that he expresses in that film is a little bit like, whoa.
Yeah.
But I did that I had to do that all the time. I can't go to this dinner. I can't do that. I've got to do this. David needs me for this. Sorry, I can't. I got to be at the show. I got to run this laundry down all the way downtown in like 15 minutes. Or like, oh, I've got to find this. We had to get get a birthday present for a very famous playwright, and it had to be a very specific birthday present that David knew. He was like, I know I want it to be this thing for this person. It's their birthday today. We have to get it to their house in not New York City.
Yeah.
And you have to go find it, buy it, and get it there. And I was like, okay, well, there goes all my plans.
Yeah.
You know? And it was hard. My partner at the time definitely expressed frustration around it. And also, you know, you get to be a part of these opportunities that are really cool, but what do you sacrifice for it? Like, yeah, I have tickets to Hedwig relatively whenever I wanted to, if I could like schedule it ahead of time, and I could bring a bunch of people, and that was really cool, or we would go to this after party, and but what am I losing in my relationships, my friendships, and my self-identity was a constant struggle.
It's tough. I mean, especially because when, you know, you're probably at an age too where you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to, like, this is where I want to be. I'm like, you're involved, like you're in it, right? You're like in this world, but how much of yourself is given up to be there, right? And that's the tricky part, because, you know, you always think about like, oh, you're looking for your big break, and you're like right there. Like, is this the stepping stone? But then, like, is it really? And
yeah.
if you got to the point where like, yeah, maybe this was, you finally, something comes up, or yeah, you can really take advantage. But like, what have you lost to get there is the probably be the real concern, right?
Yeah, and it's also, what do you take away? Like, I sort of gently remind people of this when I talk to friends or family about career struggles, is that like, well, you're not going to really understand what you're gaining from the thing until you're out of it. So like with David, I learned how to be a producer at a very large scale, which is why when people come to me and look at my content and they go, it's so well polished, it's so well executed, it's clean, it's well marketed, you always look good whenever you are in a public space, I'm like, yeah, that's all David. That's all what I had to learn how to be, that, right?
Yeah.
And I learned how to build systems. So like, how do I operationalize my content? How do I manage large budgets? How, like, that system building left brain Virgo thing is like something I cultivated that I was able to take to other things, right?
Yep.
Like when I moved to my full-time job at a startup, that's why I got that job, was they were like, oh, if you can run one person's life, you can probably run an office of 20 people. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. I think I can do that.
Yeah.
But then it's also why now in the content space, I get asked to be on a panel about, well, how do you operationalize a content pipeline? Great. Ran social media for 2 years for a large startup company. Happy to talk about how to like take your content and make a systematic pipeline around it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, where am I creative?
Yeah.
Where is the constant question I have to remind myself of, is like, I'm really good at all of that, but that is also, that path is how I lose myself making millions of dollars for other people, is by being a systems builder. So where am I a creative? Where am I an individual? Where is my voice?
Yeah. Well, you know, speaking of your voice, I kind of wanted to pivot a little bit from being someone's assistant to kind of being the face of like a tournament or a event. Is, you know, in addition to being a streamer, you have a lot of casting experience and aspirations. So let me tell you, like, as someone who watches a lot of basketball, you know, you listen to commentators and all that kind of stuff, and I'm always like, and I think about like watching Magic tournaments. I'm like, would I be any good at this? And I kind of like think to myself, like, no, I would not be good at this. There's a lot. There's not, you know, because it's the level of like complexity of like knowing the decks, knowing the lines, but then always kind of like having to push forward a conversation for, you know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes at a time, depending on, you know, how many people are in a booth. It's crazy. Like, I'm just like, no, thank you. Hard pass. But you, however, have kind of really kind of taken casting, and I think that's a really big focus of you, probably kind of going forward in the future. So, talk to me about. I know you're interested in Pokemon Unite as a casting space. I really think Magic has there's hopefully I think opportunities for you in the Magic space as well. Like, talk to me about like when you're like, oh, casting seems like something I could do. Like that seems like that's one of those things where you see people who do cast, and to me I'm like, I wonder how they got into like that particular role, right? Like that's yeah.
Yes. that so yes, casting has become a new development, and I do think it's a huge focus for me for 2024, like forward. But like, I literally asked myself that same question because I didn't know. I was like, I don't understand how people get to this place. It's not something you study.
Yeah.
You don't have a degree in it. Like, but it started by accident because I built my Twitch stream is built to be I am talking to chat about the game as it's being played, and the players can't hear me and they can't hear chat. So we're talking about lines of play because I've always been a believer that you learn from watching people fail. Mm-hmm. I did this in theater. I loved watching bad plays because you would learn as a director what not to do. And so I built the whole stream on that idea of like, we're here for education and entertainment. I'm going to talk to everybody. Chat's going to talk to me. You know, should that beast within have targeted this creature instead of that? What happens if this happens here? Or we roll that turn back and change this play. And I did that for like 2.5 years. And my chat was like, you're really good at knowing lines of play. My brain has a little lockjaw memory where I'm like, if I see a card, I know I can pretty much remember what the card does, what it costs, what color it is, and oh, I see another card. These things interact this way. My chat was like, you should play CDH. You're really good at it. You could probably be really good in the format. So I started last year sort of learning the format by playing a deck that I knew, which was Aminatou. I'd played Aminatou since she came out in 2018, so I knew all the lines.
Yeah.
But it was in getting to know the CDH community and meeting a lot of those people that all of a sudden the CDH community started to get to know me. Those people started to watch my stream, and then it just sort of became a conversation of like, have you ever tried this? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And I just said yes to a new experience is what I did.
Yeah.
And it unfolded in a way that I've since done. I've worked with Mox Masters. I've worked with Playing with Power in their Mox Master series. I've worked with. I just did that standard tournament for Birds of Paradise, which I don't even play standard, but I learned an entire format in a week.
Yeah.
And I play a lot of Pokemon Unite with my Discord community, and I love watching Pokemon Unite casters.
Yeah.
Zoinks, Spraggles, Dupe Snacks, they're all so charismatic and entertaining, and they can talk about the game in such a rapid fire way that I was like, okay, how do I actually do this? Mm-hmm. And if you're ever sort of like lost in your content career or your space, or you have an idea, ask people. Literally slide into people's DMs and ask them, how do you do it? So when I started to get interest in the casting space, I DM'd a bunch of entities in the Magic space and entities not in the Magic. I was DMing esports casters for like Fortnite on LinkedIn. Yeah. I don't play Fortnite, but talk to me about your journey.
Yeah.
How did you fall into this? And I learned that it's a lot of radio background, a lot of broadcasting backgrounds that people studied. But I don't think it's for everybody. And I say that with like the gentlest nudge, because there is sort of this thing about, well, I know how to play the game, so I can do that, right? It's like, but being able to talk in a way that is that makes the game understandable to other people. Casting is not about do you understand the game. Casting is about how well and simply can you communicate the game to other people.
Yep.
And that is a skill. That's not something that is just sort of like built into us as Magic players. And it takes work. I when I was learning how to cast for Birds of Paradise for Standard, Nile Drone Rivers, I adore her so much, gave me the best piece of advice, which was go watch Standard matches and mute the TV and do it. Teach yourself. Watch the same game 4, 5, 6 times.
Yeah.
How well can you talk about the game? That takes time. It takes skill. It takes talent. It takes work, reps. And I really want to keep going with it. I really not to self-sell, but if anybody out there is looking for casters for any Magic format, I love to learn new formats, but I also Dubesnack's Pokemon Unite caster does coaching, and I immediately was like, yes, you help me. I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to take it back, that brain got built in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh.
Oh, I'm sure.
When I was sitting and running competitive Yu-Gi-Oh drills for 6 to 8 hours a day, predicting what the lines of play were, because of that the way the format works. Fast forward to now, that's where that brain lives. Is it's this to that. That line is this. They're probably going to combo out here with this or that. If they're in that color pie with this commander, they're probably running that card. They've got 3 mana open. It could be this or that. It's just, I don't know. That's how my brain works. It can be a beautiful thing and also a detrimental thing. I want space for other shit in here.
Yeah. Well, it's not even, obviously the Yu-Gi-Oh training, but even just talking about when you were an assistant and working on Broadway, you talk about building, project lines through content systems, that's all related, right? It's finding these skills we've learned in one aspect and you refine them in another realm, but it's the same, finding, obviously, you're good at finding lines, you can see the lines, and that becomes from just reps, and again, this is kind of what we touched on earlier, is it's all this behind the scenes stuff, right? You didn't just decide I'm gonna try casting one day, sat down at the Birds of Paradise Standard thing, and just was well, let's see how it goes. Well, there's a Shieldred, hopefully they have a 1 ring or something, right? It's no, you watch these matches to get a feel for what's popular, what decks people are playing, what cards are in Standard. Do you think I know what's in Standard right now? I have no idea.
There's 30 decks in Standard.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. I was there's so many decks.
Yeah. It's is New Capenna still in Standard? Maybe. I don't know. But
right?
And for how they've extended just the amount of cards, and now obviously there tends to be the top decks, but to your point, that's, I think, because the pool of cards is so big now, there's not a one, maybe there, I might be talking out my ass, but I think the meta is relatively spread out right now, right? It's not necessarily I'm trying to remember
there's a spine to the meta, I learned, which is that a lot of it lives inside of this go wide tokeny strategy, because Boros Convoke, Azorius Knight Soldiers, also into Jeskai, right? There were as long as you're in a wedding announcement realm,
yeah.
You're gonna have this go wide strategy. And then outside of the spine and variation of that were the outliers. Your mono blacks, your mono red, red deck wins, sort of variations that were happening. Your 5-color control with the leyline bindings and the beanstalks, and I was oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's again, it's that work behind the scenes that people don't necessarily see. It's what makes you stand out from someone just trying to jump in, and that's.
And I also just want to say that because comparison is real, and I struggle with it a lot, and I just sort of I say this to myself to also say this to anybody else who might be feeling that way, that what doesn't serve me, and subsequently I think other people in this space, is comparing yourself based on what you're seeing at a surface level. Just because all you're seeing is the content that's being put out, and the success of other people and the growth of other people, you do not know what's happening underneath that. And I say that as somebody who, despite all of the growth and change and success I've had, one, it's all relative, and two, it doesn't come with constant confusion, self-doubt, lack of self-worth, phone calls to friends in the community that's like me in tears going, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what? I'm terrible at this. Like, and it's a gentle reminder that like we are human and we all struggle no matter at what level of success you are or not. Like, we all have those things.
Yeah.
So,
well, I would say, Wizards, Pokemon. Who owns Pokemon? Genetic. What's the company?
Well, it's the international. It's the Pokemon Company International.
Pokemon, yeah. But if those people like, they need to get you in front of the camera, in front of the mic as often as possible, because I think it's just, you talk about the it factor, and baby, you got it. You got that it factor. Let me tell you.
Oh, thank you. I listen, Wizards, Pokemon, anybody out there, like I want to do this. I love doing this. I love talking to people. If you've never read Malcolm Gladwell's Talking with Strangers, please read it. It will help you in your life so much about how to talk to anybody, even strangers, how to talk to people on the internet. If you're streaming and you don't know how to talk to your chat, like, it's a great book, and I recommend it to everybody I talk to in this space of learn how to talk to a stranger. It's the best gift you'll ever give yourself.
It's good. Definitely some good advice. I don't want to keep too much more of your time, but I have to, talking about Friends, we have to talk about your show In Response.
Oh my God.
I have not laughed as hard as I have during watching some of those episodes. So if you're listening, you don't know, Cobb comes to a show called In Response with his friend Jeremy. And it's a Magic the Gathering YouTube. How would you describe? It's like, how would you describe the show? How would you describe, if you had to like pitch it to someone, like, I do the show, let me tell you about it. What is your elevator pitch?
So, In Response it's for magic.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what is, right? It's a YouTube show with two drag queens, Trixie and Katya, and they talk about whatever they want. They sit down and they talk about whatever they fucking want. And the elevator pitch of it is that it is a show that talks about magic as a theory and form of self-expression with a very loud queer voice.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people it is. We're not talking about set reviews. We're not talking about deck builds, brews, best command. We're not talking about any of that stuff. Like, we're talking about, how do you identify as a color pair? Yeah. Like, or how, like, when we talk about, we do lore episodes because sometimes it's important because representation matters in the lore.
Yep.
So we'll do a lore episode about a set. But that's how I describe it. Magic, theory, and self-expression with a very loud queer voice.
Yeah, it's funny, it's frenetic, it's wild, but it is like literally like laugh out loud funny. Like, I'll be watching it and catch myself because the two of you're ridiculous. You're ridiculous in like the best way, and it's, to me, it speaks to me a lot because it's like, I enjoy Magic content that's not just like deck techs and set reviews. Like, there's so much more we can do with this space, and like that's what I think you guys are doing. I think it's just so funny. I will link it below for sure. But I had to say, like, I don't laugh out loud very often, but like I'll be catching myself and I'll just be like start busting of it because it's so ridiculous, it's so wild. It is very out there.
Frenetic. Yeah, frenetic is a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and the two of the two of you's chemistry is like, it's phenomenal. It's like that's that's a hard thing to find with someone, because when you can establish that banter, that that's really, you have something. When it's so easy and it's so fast and it's so funny, like that's it's very entertaining. It's very impressive, and so I cannot recommend that show enough.
Yeah,
it's definitely
you have to link the playlist in the comments.
Yes, for sure, definitely. It is definitely not for little kids.
Nope.
No, it's
I mean, we try to censor every word,
yeah,
but it's still some of the topics are hard to like beat around the bush with.
some of the themes might be a little more mature, but it's. And I think so. As of this recording, I think there's about 3 episodes, but I do think I saw that you guys are working on a few more, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, so we have 3 episodes right now. We just recorded episode 4 and 5, actually. Jeremy and I are trying a new sort of batch record and batch edit strategy.
Okay.
Because I appreciate all the love that show has gotten, and the ironic response has been overwhelming sometimes. That I didn't, neither Jeremy or I expected it to do what it did. I think what people also don't know, though, is that like each of those episodes is about 25 to 30 hours of editing and filming.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say it's like
insane.
It's subtle because if you just look at it, it's just like the two of you on like a green screen, but there's like a ton of editing involved. As someone who edits this show and is like, I do everything, like I like watch all the stuff. I'm like, man, how long did he find? Like, because you have to find so much stuff that you throw in. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, this would have taken. And they're not. It'd be one thing if it was like a 5 or 10 minute show, but like they're like 30, 45. They're like long. I'm just like
15 to 30 at most is the window. Yeah.
And like, but like that's still, for the amount of editing that goes into that, I'm just like, man, I would not want to have to. This is like so. I'm just thinking about like the back end stuff. Where I'm like, wow, this is so much work.
Well, it's
like.
And it has to be unscripted. Jeremy and I have accepted that, like, we can't script this show. We have to know what our idea is, and we sort of talk about the idea very roughly. But then when we sit down and just hit record, it's that raw. It just is, and it just sort of, like, word vomits out. And then I have to go, because I do all the editing for it right now. Jeremy's going to help me take on some of the, like, easier parts of the editing. But, like, I have to sit down and sort through an hour of raw unscripted footage and say, where's the joke? What's the why how do I make it funny? What's the meme? What's the reference? What's the thing? And that's also, to my own detriment, why I haven't been able to hand that show off to an editor, is because whoever edits that show needs to understand, 1, where it originated, which is the Trixie and Katya show, and 2, meme culture, pop culture references, TikTok audio. Like, the jokes are so referential that if you aren't that person, I can't teach you how to do this. But, I mean, talk about right place, right time. Like, that, Jeremy guested on one of my streams. He actually worked with my friend Max. They both did catering together in New York.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just like, it's just friend of a friend. When I went to MagicCon Minneapolis, Jeremy was like, oh, I want to go with y'all. So me, Max, Jeremy, and Kevin from Elder Drunken Highlander all went together. And it was the first time Jeremy and I met in person. And on the train ride up, we just were like, oh no, this was Philly. It was MagicCon Philly. On the train ride to Philly, it was so fast. It was like the gay banter, the quips just immediately started happening.
Yeah.
And it happened the whole weekend. And so on the train ride home, I looked at Jeremy and I was like, we should do something about this.
Yeah.
Like, we can't just let this go.
Yeah.
It's too good. And I had already been having this idea about, I wasn't seeing and hearing a queer voice in the Magic space. I was seeing queer people, and I was seeing queer people talk about deck reviews, set reviews, whatever, all that stuff, but I really wasn't. I was like, where is the actual queer lens to Magic? And I said, Jeremy, I was like, what if it's just for Magic? And he was like, oh God. I was like, yeah, we'll just set up a green screen and see what happens. And that's literally. Also, if you watch that first episode, that editing is rough, girl. I did not know how to edit green screen. I know much better now, but that first episode is hard on the eyes.
Well, that's how you get better. You jump in. I mean, that's what I do with this show. Like, I never really. I'm not a video person. Like, I'm a photographer. I'm a still photographer. So I'm like, I've kind of done video stuff, but you just thank God bless Google and YouTube. How do I do?
Yeah, YouTube.
That's there's someone who's done it and who's made a slightly too long video, or you got to jump around. Just give me the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like, there's nothing wrong with like deck text. There's nothing wrong with set reviews, right?
No, not at all.
They have their place. That's great. But
yeah.
like, like there's room for other stuff that we can do in this space. That's not just I don't need to hear another pre-con upgrade guide for the Lost Caverns or whatever deck, because that's how it's out there. But like, what else can we do with this stuff, right? Because like, you talk about the lore aspect. Like, the lore is so deep, and I feel like there's there's probably a lot of missed opportunity for like the lore aspect of what people can do in this game, right? So,
well, it goes back to, you got to see the gap and you have to fill it. Yeah. Like, my piece of advice to new content creators is, if you're just getting into this space, is like, the ship for that content, that deck tech, that upgrade guide, that whatever has sailed. There are bigger entities with way more money doing it already. You cannot fight them. Yeah. If you want to, go ahead. Live David and Goliath life. I support you 100%. But if you want to really like make a statement in the space, or affect change, or grow, or find yourself, find your voice, ask yourself what do you want to see that you're not seeing? Mm-hmm. Ask yourself that question. What do I want and that I'm not seeing in the space yet? And if you can answer it, make that. That's the thing I want to see, is you making that thing.
Yep.
And once you've made that thing, really learning what it is. So like within Response, Jeremy and I knew, by the second episode we knew, we were like, it has to go back to the game. It is really fun to talk about legendary creatures that we would like to, have sex with. Yeah. Hilarious. So much fun. Yep. Right? Who doesn't love to talk about that? But it has to go back to the game. Yeah. And so I pitched the idea of, well, what if we do how good is the creature as a commander? And Jeremy was like, no, that's boring. And then Jeremy showed up. He didn't even tell me. He showed up to the recording with the lore for each of his characters that he had picked. And I was like, that's genius, because now we're all learning something that we didn't know about a character. And we're also talking about if they're going to pay for dinner on the first date. Exactly. So as long as each topic goes back to the spine of the game and the show, and we learn something, and it has a queer voice to it, that's the show. Yep. And it can be as amorphous and flexible as that.
Yes, it is. At least, let me tell you, like I said, it's hilarious, it's informative, it's fun. Like, it's a fun, and you can tell, like, it's real. The banter is real. The quips are real. Like, there is lightning in a bottle there that you have captured. So
the mess ups are real. Like, all of that stuff. Those are I press record before we start actually doing the show to get that sort of like mess up moment. But even when we're recording, and if we're recording and something happens that's like a recurring joke, I just like say, well, it's canon now. Like, it's canon. You just have to go with it and say, well, it's canon now.
That's hilarious. So K0ppk0pp, again, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I don't want to take up too much of your time left in this night.
This has been really great. I'm so glad that we met. I'm so glad that we got to do this. I'm so glad that we got to have lunch, because like, community, friendship, this is all like, yes, this is a podcast and it's an interview, but like, it's also just spending time with people.
Yeah, it's been great. And so what I do, I have my guests when they come on to pick a charity of their choice for the show to make a small donation to. You pick Trans Lifeline. So just kind of as a small little gesture for the show, I'll be making a small donation to Trans Lifeline to
thank you.
Popular charity of the show. Very, very good charity, do a lot of good work. Trans people, unfortunately, in a lot of places in America right now, are under attack just for trying to exist. It's
I mean, we said it earlier. It's like, it's this sort of like rhetoric, this belief that has sort of spawned in the past few years is absolutely bonkers to me. as if it's some sort of like new concept of brainwashing. It's like, this has existed for millennia. It's so shocking to me. And these people, trans people are human.
Yeah.
We are all human, trying to find our voice and our own self-identity and our own expression. And why is that wrong, condemned? And some of the most amazing human beings that I know in my life are trans-identifying, and I adore them. And so, yes, please. Yes. Please, Trans Lifeline.
100%. Additionally, what I'm going to do is pop up my community board through the magic of video editing, something like this. And, we've talked a lot about community. I like to say, this show has a big emphasis on community. So what I'm going to do is subscribe to your Twitch. So even when the show's done and we're done recording here, it's just like a small way that I can kind of continue to support you in your endeavors. Just after we're out of here, it's a way to like kind of keep being in your corner and keep hoping it pushes you forward to create more content and get on more casting and all that kind of good stuff. So.
You didn't tell me you were going to do that.
It's a surprise. Yeah, I know it's a surprise. That's what I do. It's the feel good moment of the show. It's really where I really lock in my guests, really make them part of the thing. So yeah,
Mission
it's just it's just
good.
Oh, good. Again, like I said, I think you're amazing. I think you are providing a very unique perspective in the magic space, and I hope you and Jeremy continue to make awesome episodes. I hope you continue to pursue casting opportunities. I hope to see you, next to like Alias V on a cast sometime. Like that's
fingers crossed, honey. My email is in the bio. Okay, like go. Reach out.
just start tweeting reels at Wizards Magic. Hey, I mean, if you need somebody, yeah. So again, this has been phenomenal. It's always great to talk to you. I will link. Like I said, I'll link in response your YouTube channel and all that kind of good stuff below. If you like what I do here, feel free to like and subscribe to my show. That's a thing people can do. I'm trying to be better about this year about saying it and not feel super awkward. Let's see if I turn red.
Say it.
Say it.
You deserve to have a voice. Say it.
I deserve. I don't necessarily just. I have enough of a voice and whatever, but like if you like what you see here, help me give voices to people who I think deserve to have a bigger voice. That's what I'm trying to do. So feel free to hit that subscribe button. I appreciate it. And Cop, I'll see you hopefully soon.
I'll see you soon too. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for sticking around this whole time.
All right, we'll catch you later.
All right, bye.